All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're essentially opening up a historical detective case. It's a mystery that revolves around one of the world's most important ancient books, and it all boils down to a pretty simple but really profound question. What if one of the oldest Bibles we have is actually incomplete? I mean, think about that. An artifact that's a cornerstone for so many, just missing key pieces of the puzzle. And look, this isn't just some hypothetical question. This is the real deal, a mystery surrounding a very real manuscript. So let's start digging into the evidence.
So at the very heart of this whole thing is the Codex Vaticanus. It's this absolutely beautiful manuscript from the 4th century. Now, because it's so old, a lot of people think it must be super reliable, right? But here's the catch. When you compare it to almost all the other biblical manuscripts out there, it's short, like nearly 3,000 words short in the Gospels alone. So the big question is, how do we figure out what's going on here?
Well, we have to use a kind of detective's tool. It's called internal evidence. The easiest way to think about it is like the DNA of the text itself. Scholars look at everything, the specific vocabulary used, the author's writing style, whether the story flows logically, and they try to piece together what the original author probably wrote. And let me tell you, this is where the real fight over the Vaticanus happens.
Okay, so let's put on our detective hats. We're going to look at 3 specific puzzles, 3 case files, if you will, where the Codex Vaticanus tells a different story from what you'd find in most other Bibles.
First up, we've got case file number 1. And this is probably the most famous biblical mystery there is, the ending of the Gospel of Mark. You see, in the Codex Vaticanus, the whole story just stops at verse 8. It completely leaves out the last 12 verses that talk about Jesus appearing to people after the resurrection. Now, the debate here is pretty much split down the middle. On one hand, you have scholars who say the writing style and the Greek words used in those final verses just don't match the rest of Mark's gospel. It's like a different author suddenly took over the keyboard. But on the other hand, people point out that without those verses, the story ends so weirdly. The women run away from the tomb, terrified, and that's it, the end. It's just an incredibly abrupt, kind of unsatisfying way to close the book.
And this is where it gets really interesting. If the book ends where the Vaticanus manuscript says it does, the very last word in the original Greek is gar. Gar basically means for or because. Now, one famous scholar, Dean Burgon, said it was just unthinkable that any Greek book, especially a gospel, would end on a word like that. Seriously, it's like trying to end a sentence with the word and.
All right, on to case file number 2. This one comes from the book of Acts. It's a story about the Apostle Philip talking to an Ethiopian official. Now, in most Bibles, right before he gets baptized, the official makes this really powerful confession of faith. But in the Vaticanus, nothing. Just silence. The entire verse is just gone.
So why would it be missing? Well, one theory is that it was added later. Maybe a scribe thought it'd be good to pop in a formal confession that matched how the church was doing baptisms at the time. But the flip side of that argument is that without the verse, there's a huge logical hole in the story. The official asks, hey, what's stopping me from being baptized? And in the Vaticanus version, Philip just does it. No answer. The missing verse is what fills that gap. It's the logical reason why Philip baptizes him, because of his confession.
Okay, our third and final case file. And this one deals with one of the most powerful moments in the entire New Testament. When Jesus is on the cross, most versions of the story have him saying, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." But you can probably guess where this is going. In the Codex Vaticanus, that prayer isn't there.
And here, the debate really cuts to the core of what the author intended. The argument for leaving it out is based on a rule of thumb we'll get to in a sec, the idea that shorter texts are usually older. But the argument for keeping it in is a really powerful one. I mean, would Jesus, the man who taught everyone to love your enemies, really not pray for the very people who are executing him? For a lot of people, taking that verse out feels like someone was intentionally pruning the text for theological reasons.
And that right there, that brings us to the absolute heart of this whole debate. All 3 of these case files, they're all pointing to the exact same fundamental question. So what's more likely? Is it more likely that scribes added little notes and details to clarify things over the centuries? Or is it more likely that they deleted things they found controversial or just didn't like? Think about it, because how you answer that question pretty much decides which side you'll land on with the Codex Vaticanus.
So let's break this down into 2 main philosophies. First, you've got the shorter is better camp. They believe that scribes were more likely to add things over time, notes, clarifications, you name it. So a shorter text like Vaticanus must be closer to the original, right? It's purer. But then you have the other view, which flips that completely.
This camp says that actually, some early groups were known for deleting scripture they didn't agree with. From their point of view, Vaticanus isn't purer because it's shorter. It's been censored.
So really, it all comes down to how you picture the anonymous scribe who copied this thing out almost 1,700 years ago. Who was this person? Were they totally neutral, careful copyist, just trying to preserve the purest text they could find, one that didn't have all the later additions? Or were they an omitter? Was this a person who, either on purpose or by accident, left out thousands of words that belonged in the story?
And in the end, the Codex Vaticanus forces us to think about more than just ancient words on a page. It raises a much, much deeper question. When you're looking at history, and the evidence is contradictory, and all the people who were actually there are long gone, how do you decide which story to trust? That's the real puzzle that this incredible manuscript leaves us with.